Rick and Morty has long held a reputation as one of the most inventive and boundary-pushing animated shows of the modern era. Known for its biting satire, high-concept sci-fi premises, and deeply flawed yet compelling characters, the show has cultivated a fiercely loyal fan base. However, even a series as celebrated as Rick and Morty isn't immune to missteps, and Season 7 Episode 8, titled Rise of the Numbericons the Movie, has been widely criticized as one of the worst episodes in the show's history. In this video, I will argue that this episode fails not only as a piece of entertainment, but also as an installment of Rick and Morty by examining its lackluster storytelling and inconsistent tone. One of the most glaring issues with Rise of the Numbericons the movie is its disjointed and overly convoluted narrative. The episode's central premise, a parody of 1980s toy-based cartoons like Transformers and Voltron, had the potential to explore themes of nostalgia, consumerism, and the commercialization of childhood. However, rather than delivering a sharp critique or a fresh spin on this well-trodden trope, the episode opts out for a muddled and incoherent plot that seems to prioritize chaotic spectacle over meaningful storytelling. The narrative becomes bogged down in a series of disconnected action sequences and overwrought exposition, making it difficult for viewers to invest in the story. While Rick and Morty has often thrived on chaotic energy, this episode crosses the line into outright confusion with poorly explained plot points and an overabundance of new characters who receive little to no development. This lack of meaningful concept or coherent conclusion leaves viewers questioning the purpose of the episode, as it fails entirely to provide the payoff expected from such a high concept premise. Rick and Morty is renowned for its ability to balance absurd humor with moments of genuine emotional depth. However, Rise of the Numbericons the movie fails to strike this balance, resulting in a tonal inconsistency that undermines the episode's impact. The humor is often forced and juvenile, relying heavily on tired gags and lowbrow jokes that feel so out of place in a show known for its sharp wit. Meanwhile, the episode's attempts at emotional resonance fall flat. A subplot involving Morty grappling with feelings of inadequacy and his desire to prove himself to Rick is hastily introduced and resolved, leaving little room for genuine character development. And Rick's not even there, so was any growth actually made? The lack of emotional grounding makes it difficult for viewers to connect with the characters or actually care about their struggles, which further contributes to the episode's overall lack of cohesion and just proves the fact how much it sucks. And additionally, the tonal changes within this episode, from absurd action sequences to awkward attempts at sentimentality, create an incredibly jarring viewing experience. The episode's inability to commit to a consistent tone diminishes its comedic and narrative effectiveness, making it one of the least memorable entries in the series. I mean, all I remember about this episode is that it's terrible and not funny. Another major flaw of Rise of the Numbericons the movie is its failure to advance the development of its main characters. Rick isn't even there. Rick and Morty have always been defined for their complex and evolving relationship, but this episode does next to nothing to explore their dynamic. Morty is relegated to the role of a passive observer, with little agency or meaningful contribution to the plot. He's just kind of hanging around. The over-reliance on gimmicks leaves little to no room for the characters to drive the story. And this lack of character focus is particularly disappointing given the show's history of using its outlandish scenarios as a backdrop for exploring deeply personal and existential themes. It was a huge risk to focus on these random characters like Goldenfold or Ice-T and then just throw Morty in the mix to make it seem like Rick and Morty. And that risk did not pay off at all. It really feels like they just put no effort into writing this episode. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Rick and Morty is at its best when it's taking huge risks. But unfortunately, a risk can't succeed every time. That's just not how they work. So, unfortunately, every once in a while, we're going to get an episode that just absolutely sucks. But if that's the cost of getting Fear No Mort, Unmortrickin', Pickle Rick, and stuff like that, then it's okay, I guess. But still, this episode is just laughably bad. It's actually not even laughably bad. It's just bad. It's not funny. It doesn't deserve that credit. This is a bad episode. And what really sucks is this episode came out right after the Justin Roiland incident, so the expectations for the show could not be higher because all of the toxic fans were saying that the show is going to be terrible now. And unfortunately, they can use this episode now to argue their point, which isn't true because Season 7 did have a lot of great moments. I mean, I already mentioned Unmortrickin' and Fear No More Mort, but I also think that the Jerick Trap is a great episode, and so is That's a Morte and Air Force Wong. So not only was this episode terrible, it couldn't have come at a worse time. This episode feels like they just took all of the things that have somewhat worked in past episodes and then threw them all together in a blender, hoping it would create a compelling narrative, but it just shows that this episode has very little thought and effort put into it. The one plus that I can think of this episode being bad is the fact that it maybe encourages the show to not make sequels anymore, because we're tired of sequels as a community. I mean, we sat through almost 30 movies of the MCU, and it's starting to have its toll. So something as creative as Rick and Morty shouldn't really try to do sequels. I think it's okay to do the clip show episodes with like the interdimensional cable stuff. Those are okay. And really, that's more of a trope than a sequel or a series. And this episode isn't a sequel in the normal sense of a sequel, but it does pick up where the Get Swifty episode left off on. So even though this episode doesn't actually connect with the events of the season 2 episode that we all know and love, it still just kind of feels unoriginal and uninteresting. The one little bit of credit I will give to this episode is that it is the 69th episode overall, which I didn't even realize until I was doing my research for this video, but that's kind of funny. I mean, an episode as raunchy and gross as this one probably should be the 69th episode. But even with that, this episode could have been better. It's just squandered potential with a decent premise. The idea of making a parody of 1980s cartoons is ripe with opportunities for satire and commentary, yet this episode barely scratches the surface of these themes. Instead of examining the cultural impact of these cartoons on their role in shaping childhood nostalgia, the episode just settles for surface level jokes, and they fall flat. The world building in this episode is also disappointingly shallow. This whole universe of letters and numbers is introduced with minimal context or detail, leaving viewers with more questions than answers, or it just rushes into everything and throws it all at us. This lack of depth not only weakens the episode's satirical potential, but it also makes it harder for the audience to suspend their belief or become invested in the story. So overall, Rise of the Numbercons the movie stands out as a rare misstep in Rick and Morty's otherwise stellar run. While every show is bound to have its ups and downs, this episode serves as a reminder of the importance of strong writing, cohesive narratives, and just a little bit of thought when it comes to maintaining a show's quality. As fans, we can only hope that future episodes will learn from the mistakes of Rise of the Numbercons the movie. Even that episode title is annoying. It's just bad. I don't like saying it this much. I've hated on this episode in past videos, and one time someone commented saying that this episode has an amazing legacy, or that like the hype around it was incredible or something like that. And I don't know how to take that, because I thought this episode was just as bad as its reputation says it is. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more videos just like this, and thank you so much for watching all the way until the end of the video. Comment down below what you want me to talk about next, and I'll see you guys in the next one.